One of the things that I love about this book, but that was not immediately clear to me, was the characters. There's some great characters, some really idiosyncratic characters. So I'll ask like a book club question, all right? And we'll just see where it goes. Who was your favorite character? Maggie. So Maggie is this young, probably about your age.
Who identified? Yeah.
From New York, I think, or from up around New York. And she comes down to this racetrack. Why? Because she's in love with a man.
Sort of. I would debate that.
We'll talk about it. Yeah, we'll eventually, yeah, that's one of the things I want to touch on later. But she comes to this racetrack and she's got these 4 or 5 horses that Tommy, her boyfriend, wants to race in what is called a claim race, right? Claiming race.
Right.
Did everybody get how that worked?
Yes.
It took me a while.
Took a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, so a claiming race works this way. If I want to put my horse into a $1,500 race with other $1,500 horses, that's cool. But somebody can buy my horse before the race begins for $1,500,
Right.
which discourages me from putting a horse in that's worth $10,000. That's how it works.
I had to look.
I didn't know
up.
that worked.
I had to actually.
Yeah.
I did a search and I had to look it up because I had no idea what they were talking
What
about.
was
in the
going
book,
on.
and it seemed important enough that I needed to know to continue. So I stopped
Yeah.
and looked it up, and
Yeah.
They have a little, the little description here, but I had to go back to it a couple of times. The other thing that I just had to remind myself is the whole point is you're trying to con people. You're trying,
Right.
the assumption is you have a horse that is actually better than it looks.
Right.
And so you want to be able to convince people that your horse is crap
Yep.
right.
and then run it and have it win.
Right.
But if they figure out that it's not a bad horse, then they'll buy it and then you
Now you're SOL.
lose, yes.
So Maggie and Tommy come to this racetrack in West Virginia, and they're going to race 4 or 5 horses. Hopefully, get some purses and scoop. That's the plan. And Maggie does end up really kind of falling in love with horses, doesn't she? Yeah. And we'll talk more about Maggie. She is a fascinating character, very oddly complicated. She is. She's interesting. Christine, who would you say was your favorite character?
It's probably a toss-up between Medicine Ed and Two Tie.
You are right on my page.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Medicine Ed because I want to talk about Two Tie.
All right. Okay. Well, what I was thinking about Medicine Ed is, I love how he pretends he doesn't care, but he totally does.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think coming back to that point you made about how, they do these horrible things to the horses. I mean, part of the reason that Medicine Ed can do that is that he keeps telling himself that he really doesn't connect with the horses in the way that he once did, or
Right.
there's only the one horse that he's cared about, and yet, just as he says he doesn't care about Maggie, and yet you see this person who keeps sort of holding himself back from connecting as a way of protecting himself, and yet that only makes him seem more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so-
Medicine Ed is a groomsman, and they call him Medicine Ed because he makes potions and powders and magic. That is right. So Medicine Ed he makes stuff that. Well, first he shoots them full of vitamin B and pume, that kind of stuff. There's that. But then he makes something that he calls goofer powder.
Right.
That he thinks is going to give them that last burst at the end to finish. And he's been at this track for a long time. He's an older guy. He's in his 70s.
Yeah, so he's a practitioner of African American folk magic. So
Yes.
the word goofer in and of itself references these traditions of healing and self-protection that would be part of folk culture, particularly in the South.
I did not know that.
Yes.
I just thought it was a great word.
It is a good word. But yeah, so it has his dialect, all of that sort of connects to a folk tradition that has to do with trying to keep yourself and those you care about and need healthy. And that's, I think, if you read some of the the Charles Chestnut stories, you'll get the same dialect and you'll have similar kinds of stories of folk magic, I guess is the right word, yeah.
Right, well, that's, yeah, I mean, that's what that's what he believes.
Yeah.
He believes it's magic for sure, yeah. What about you? I know you talked at one point about having a little bit of trouble identifying with any of the characters.
I did. To me, what was fascinating is I've read many books where they're just unpleasant characters that I can't identify with, and I usually end up not finishing those. Here, by the end of the book, I clearly had identified Maggie as the favorite, but I have a confession to make. I mean, I was a third to halfway through the book before I realized exactly who Maggie was to some of the other people.
Right.
It was not clear, to use the bad pun coming out of the gate, that she was the frizzly-haired.
Right. Right.
Necessarily. And so when that light bulb went off, things began to come together that had already occurred that I'd read some time ago. That the narrative began to fall into place for me in a much more meaningful way. But Maggie is kind of the central, kind of character who is redeemed, through this process of racing these horses, of having these experiences, and then kind of returning home.
Yeah, she does represent, more than any of the other characters, that classic idea that the character changes, that there's something that where many of these characters, Medicine Ed being one of them, are, they're where they were at the beginning. It goes to, right at the beginning of the book, she writes about the hot walker machine, where the horses are going around and around. They're on this machine, they just go around in a circle. They never go anywhere. That's it. A lot of the characters, most of the characters, with the exception maybe of Maggie, are on that hot walker machine. They're just going around and around. Just, that's where they are. They're in this world, they're gonna stay there. Maggie goes through, she becomes a changed woman in some regards.
Some of the things I love about the story is comparing, like most horse stories focus on a horse and the people are fun. Like this had a very clear comparison between like the life of the horse and the life of the people who manage horses.
That's great.
It's very similar and really tragic.
I gotta tell you, and I can't give anything away, one of my favorite characters was Two Time.
Yeah.
I think he's great, and he's got this dog, Elizabeth. She's like 16.
I love that it's named Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Queen Elizabeth the whole time.
Right.
Okay.
A perfect example of the challenge of this book is that when he first started, his first line or something like that is, and we should talk about the use of, she uses no quotations in this book.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Which, right? You don't like that. You were like, give me quotations.
Hated it.
Yeah. It's hard to get used to. But the first line he has is like, come along, Elizabeth.
Right.
Where did she come from? And it took me like 2 paragraphs to go, oh, she's a dog. Now, in the end, I love Two Time, but Elizabeth may be my favorite character.
Yeah, actually I was gonna.
I'm a dog person.
Yeah.
Loved her. And what I loved about Two Time is that he feels, he talks, he needs to take care of somebody. And Elizabeth is that person that he's taking care of, but also Maggie in this, right? She doesn't even know that he's kind of watching over her and he's, ready to, do what he has to protect her from terrible, people. In any event, that was my favorite character.
Sure. Not to mention the fact that Two Time's name is Two Time in the book, and the dog has the normal name.
That's
Oh my gosh, that's totally
So
true.
names
It
are
was so
fantastic.
fascinating to me that of course we've got the colorful names are associated with the people, but the kind of the names that we associate with the people who we know are all attached to none of the main characters.
Right, that's great.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. My whole exposure to horse racing in literature, and I use that word, Dick Francis. Does anybody know Dick
Sure,
Francis?
I read a lot of Dick
Right,
Francis.
so
yes.
I mean, I was like, that's a book about horse racing, it's by Dick Francis. This was not Dick Francis at all, so that took me some getting used to.
This struck me as what horse racing really looks like, probably most of the people who do it.
Right, exactly.
And of course, we're seeing the World Series team,
Right.
at the end when we read about it in a Dick Francis.
Yeah, exactly, that's how I want, Dick Francis writes about the sport of kings.
Right.
This is the sport of serfs, or something, you know what I mean, it's much darker.
But-
That was my
Yeah.
attempt to get back to the medieval.
Yeah, well, if I can get medieval on you for a little bit.
Oh, please do.
I love how the hot walker ends up in many ways also being, if you flip it on its side, it becomes the wheel of fortune. That people are trying to get up, right, and trying to come on top, and yet they're always spinning down and falling to the bottom. And so, how much of this book is about luck and about fortune? Maggie even is called Fortune by Tommy at a point. So there's this way of if you think about those stories that we normally hear, it's about a race. It's very linear. It's about who gets there first, whereas this story is about people who are on the hot walker of life, right? It's a wheel of fortune where they can't really ever get off. If they get to the bottom, they'll get up again, but ultimately they know if they're there, they're going to end up at the bottom again. So there's this sense of circularity rather than linearity about it that makes it.
I think I love it. That is great. That is absolutely spot on. I love that. And it actually moves right into what has to be one of the predominant themes in the book.